Everybody's quiet now. All right, welcome. We're going to officially get started here. Let's start with a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai b'divrei Torah. So Shavua Tov, I want to mention today is also Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Thursday night is Shavuot. Hopefully many of you will be able to join us for our Shavuot program. And I want to mention that today is also David's Yartzeit. He passed away 5 years ago on Rosh Chodesh Sivan. So got a candle here and we're remembering him. And for some reason, 5 years, this Yartzeit feels a little heavier and more significant. Maybe it's kind of the corollary of how when we have a birthday, that's a 5 or 10 year interval that it's magnified. But he's been a real presence around here in the last week or so. So you should hopefully have a copy of Nechama Leibovitz. We're looking for page 288, and as we are finishing up the blessing portion of this chapter, Nechama Leibovitz asked the question of why should we be motivated by all of these material blessings? Why does God promise us material blessings? So does anybody have the text readily available right in front of you there?
Yeah, right here. 288?
Yeah, 288. Hey. Who's that? Sarah Lee, you have it? Did I?
Yes.
Okay. So at the bottom of the page, do you see where it starts quoting Maimonides? Maimonides gives another explanation. Mm-hmm. So would you read aloud for us, please?
Okay, like you're reading.
Maimonides gives another explanation which provides a solution chiefly to Albo's second question. Why did the Torah mention at all material rewards? The idea behind the material rewards promised in the Torah is as follows. The Almighty says to you, if you perform the precepts, I shall assist you to carry them out and to perfect yourself, do them, and remove from you all the obstacles in your path. For a man cannot perform the precepts if he is sick, hungry, or thirsty, in the hour of battle or under siege. The Almighty therefore promised that he would rid them of these situations and that they would enjoy health and tranquility, enabling them to perfect their knowledge and merit the hereafter. These material rewards are thus not an end in themselves, but a means. Conversely, if they transgress the Torah, evil will overtake them, preventing them from carrying out the precepts. Quote, because thou didst not serve the Lord thy God with joyfulness and with gladness of heart, by reason of the abundance of all things, therefore shalt thou serve thine enemy. That's Deuteronomy 28:47-48. If you have performed some of the precepts out of love, and by dint of your efforts, I shall help you to perform all of them and remove any obstacles in your path. But if you forsake and despise them, I shall put obstacles in the way of your performance till you are deprived of spiritual perfection and immortality. This is the implications of our sage's dictum. The reward, quote, the reward of a precept is a precept.
All right, so there's a lot going on in that paragraph. Let's see if we can unpack some of the major ideas that Maimonides is proposing, and then we can explore the themes. So first of all, we are helped along in whatever path we choose. So if we choose the path of the good, if we choose to do mitzvot, the last teaching, the reward of a precept is a precept, mitzvah goreret mitzvah. the word that they're translating as precept is the word mitzvah. So one mitzvah leads to another. And conversely, that same passage, Avera, goreret Avera, a transgression leads to another transgression. So this is sort of the understanding of how can Pharaoh be held responsible for the hardening of his heart when the Torah tells us that God hardened his heart. So is it Pharaoh hardening his heart, or is God hardening his heart? And one of the classic responses is Pharaoh hardens his own heart until such point as then God supports him in the path that he has already chosen, which is hardness of heart. So if you perform the precepts, I'll help you carry them out. And Maimonides is suggesting, how does God help us carry out mitzvot? By giving us a foundation of material well-being so that we're not distracted by the need to take care of our material situation, and therefore we can focus on more elevated concepts and endeavors. The problem with this way of thinking, in my mind, is that it can very much lead to a blame the victim mentality that we've seen before. So the physical is the foundation of the spiritual. I think we can recognize that there's some wisdom in that. Yes, the physical is the foundation of the spiritual. If you are sick, it's hard to be praying. It's hard to be learning. You feel terrible. You can't do anything until you feel better. So in a way, there's truth to that. A man cannot perform the precepts, i.e. mitzvot, if he is sick, hungry, or thirsty, in the hour of battle or under siege. So yeah, if you need food, we've talked about that before. No food, one problem. Enough food, many problems. So we need a certain level of physical well-being. What happens then with people who have chronic health challenges? So is the implication then that if you have some chronic physical challenge, if you're chronically hungry, does that mean that you can't be an elevated spiritual person because you're so preoccupied with your material world? So I think that's the challenge of this reward and punishment kind of thinking, and imagining that our blessing, I mean, that's obviously the theme of this chapter. That's what the Torah is proposing, and that's what Maimonides is reiterating. But when we think about it, I think we need to be aware of the fact that this is a very difficult and challenging concept. So the material rewards are not an end in themselves, but a means. So it's not that I'm rewarded by having a lot of food, but I'm given enough food so that I can then spend my time performing mitzvot. And hi, Cherry. And,
Hi, sorry I'm late.
oh, we're glad you're here. And performing mitzvot and not worrying about where is my next meal coming from. It's interesting that he quotes that wonderful verse in Deuteronomy. I love that particular verse because it's, normally our tradition encourages us to focus on behavior, not attitudes, not beliefs. It's all about action in the world. What are we doing? And yet that text in Deuteronomy says that punishment comes to us not only because we didn't do mitzvot, because we didn't do the right thing, but because we didn't do them with the right attitude. We didn't do them with joy. Because you did not serve Adonai your God with joyfulness and with gladness. So it's not only that we have to do the right thing, but that happiness is directed as part of the fulfillment of the mitzvah. So at least I can see at least three themes in here that we might want to think about. One is this connection between righteous behavior and reward, and conversely punishment. One is what's the relationship between needing to have our material needs met before we can move on, and one is this emphasis on right behavior connected also with right feeling, right attitude. So as I said, there's a lot going on there. And I want to just remind everyone as well that in the Kabbalistic tradition, we talk about four worlds: the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual. And I hear a little echo of that going on here as well. The physical is first, and then we move up, and it's very much hierarchical: physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and we can't get to the spiritual except through that ladder. So Owen, I saw that you have a thought.
Yeah, I think that the sense of righteousness in the real sense reduces the need for physical things. Like that the more satisfied you are with your connection with Hashem, you understand your place in the world, etc. I think generally means you don't need quite as much of the other things.
Well, and Maimonides is clearly very ascetic in his approach. You know, he says, you know, he's all about really living on bread and water and very little sleep, and work less and study and pray more, that we only need to work just enough to meet our minimum needs. And what he would define as minimum needs is not what we would define as minimum needs. What he defines in writing as minimum needs is a pile of hay or straw to lay down on, and you know, some minimal food to sustain us, and that's it. So finding that balance point of, you know, it's all about that wants versus needs. I'm going to make a note. I'm going to look up that Maimonides reference where he talks about the, you know, how we should spend our day. And I think he says you should work no more than 4 hours a day, and you should have like the most minimum wage kind of job that is the least intellectually demanding, because that way, even while you're working, you can still have what the Hasidim call dveikut. You can still be connected to God because you're not in a job that's occupying all of the real estate in your brain. So let me make a note to get you that.
And yet he worked in the court of the richest ruler of the time period and dressed accordingly to be in that area.
Well, and worked his ass off. You know, he's speaking very much from his own experience. And, you know, it could be, David, that observing that extravagance, you know, led him to err on the side of asceticism. That, you know, he may have witnessed the pitfalls of wealth up close and personal. And yeah, you know, he certainly didn't follow his own advice in terms of number of hours of work. I've shared with many of you before the famous letter that he wrote to his translator, Ibn Tibbon. Who remembers?
Ibn Tibbon.
Ibn Tibbon is, and I'll send you that again too. So there's this beautiful, famous letter that he writes to his translator who wants to come and have a visit with him. And Maimonides basically says, don't bother, because this is what you're going to see when you come. You know, I ride, as David said, in the morning to the Sultan's court, and I'm working there all day, you know, with him and his family and his harem. And then I get home in the late afternoon. I have my one meal a day, and then I'm busy all late afternoon and evening with the needs of the Jewish community and people coming to me for advice, guidance, counsel, problem solving. And then, in his spare time, he's, writing the Mishnah Torah and the Guide of the Perplexed and the commentary on the Mishnah and, just a few other small projects.
So he was productive, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
He's a highly productive person.
highly productive and, minimal attention to his own material needs. But, to what I would say would be an extreme and not a role model that is really available for us.
To Owen's comment, though, it struck me like, Owen, are you talking about just being content in whatever situation you're in? Contentment is sort of what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think that as outside things are more important to you, it means that what's inside has a greater burden to provide what it can't possibly provide. It can't provide those things. So the idea that I'm satisfied with what I have, I understand who I am, I behave in ways that are prescribed in what we're talking about, makes it easier to feel, I think, satisfied with what a person has. It doesn't mean they have more. It means that they need less. Emotionally, spiritually, I don't know.
We were talking earlier about Pirkei Avot, and you said almost precisely what it says in Pirkei Avot. Ezehu Ashir, who is wealthy, Sameach Bechelko, the person who is happy with what they have. And the opposite of that would be, it's Shavuot this week, so we're going to be looking at the 10 Commandments. And the 10th commandment is, thou shalt not covet. Why should you not covet? Because if you look at what other people have and you want it, you will never be happy, because there will always be people who have more and better and newer and shinier than you have.
I do not buy into that concept. There are too many people we have tried to support over the years with the South Phoenix, trailer parks, reservations, poor in inner cities. If you're an aesthetic, oh, that's great. There's little there. I can do all that work. They're not happy being poor. They may be trying to work hard. Gandhi, Maimonides all had within around them a richer support system, and they can afford to be an aesthetic. But if you're really truly poor, you don't have a support system to support you to be poor. You're just poor, and you're scrabbling every day to make a living. I've been down far enough at one time. There's very little support. You live very close to the margin. You cannot afford to say, I'll be satisfied with just a bed of straw. So any of these people who speak that way always seem to have, to my view and what I've read, a support system around them that allowed them to be that way, but not the person themselves.
So what do they say? Rich or poor, it's nice to have money.
Yeah, it's nice to have some money.
So you're saying it's almost a luxury to be able to take this position.
I agree. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
For most of us, we have to make a living, and we have to do what we have to do, and we don't have the luxury of that. However, David, that, huh?
It's better than the word but.
Okay. However, I would either add or whatever. I'm not sure whether I'm adding on or just extending, but oh God, I forgot what I was going to say.
Welcome to the club.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. Okay. I do think that this COVID period has demonstrated some real weaknesses in the way we do economics and the economics of time, the economics of income, etc. I think that it has shown us that there is some deep spiritual and interpersonal stuff within our intimates that could be done if we had a little bit more time every day to do that. I think that, we've had maybe too much time now, but having more time like they do in Europe, to make sure that growing up, it was a different world, but, 70 years ago, everybody was off on the weekends. Everything was closed all weekend. It was a Monday through Friday existence, and we all had, there were probably restaurants and grocery stores open and things like that, but people didn't go to work 90 hours a week. We have so many people right now who are just slaving away at ridiculous numbers of hours, and they have nothing left. My son, is leaving this job that he's been in because physically he can't stand it, but also he has nothing left in him when he gets home to give to anybody else, including himself. And this has been a luxury in the sense that, he could survive and still have that time and start to rethink everything. I don't know. I just think that luxury is something that we should be able to afford more, that more people should be able to participate in. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, totally. And what you're essentially saying is
Everything in balance.
exactly.
Can I share some thoughts that I've had with this,
Please, Sharon.
going back to the levels, the baby or the child who's not getting the nourishment,
Mm-hmm.
or the child who's not getting enough for breakfast when he goes to school is not able to get to the intellectual or the spiritual level. So these things are very apropos to the child, the baby that's not touched, that's left to lay in a crib, is being starved. So I think this kind of fits together with what's been said. And so this goes on from generation to generation. The teenager who's not getting what he needs at home, whatever those needs are, is going to be with the gang and do what he has to do to take care of his needs. So this can go on from generation to generation, and doing little Band-Aid things of help doesn't seem to be working. So I think, I don't know what I think, but it just seems to fit into what was read, the reading for today.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. And you might recall that chart that I had in the Rosh Hashanah bulletin this past year about human needs, and the book by Sofer that suggested that every interaction that we have is about meeting some need, and that we have universal needs, and we're always about trying to get those needs met. And certainly from a developmental perspective, Sharon, yeah, if an infant, a child, a young person, their physical needs are not met, then they're not going to grow in any of these other ways. But then my question is, so what happens to, now we've grown to adulthood, and aside from food and emotional needs, what happens to people who have profound physical challenges? Are we suggesting, and I think Maimonides is suggesting, that those individuals cannot access the level of spirituality because of a preoccupation with needing to deal with their physical situation? And that's where I get concerned about a sense of judgment.
I think also that sometimes we're not even aware of our needs, like this being locked down thing. I'm pretty okay with it because I'm a loner and I was an only child, and so I'm all right, and I'm rarely bored. But when I play with my cat, or I pet my cat and she snuggles with me, I realize I was really missing that physical connection. I was missing the hugs. I didn't even know it. But lots of times what we're lacking is not in our, conscience. It's, if we're lacking a vitamin or a certain nutrient, we don't even know it. But it could be going on, on another level.
I see Marcy and then David.
To what you said, Rabbi, about somebody who has an ongoing physical issue, sort of in my mind harkens back to what David said. Do they have a support system? And what Becca always talks about about community. If you have a problem or you have an issue and you have people around who you can go to for help, it's gonna I'm a loner too, kind of like Sharon, but it's been nice to have the support system with Neil's health issues. I really appreciate it. Without that, I'm sure I would have gotten through it, but it would have been different. So for somebody with an ongoing physical problem, it may depend on what kind of support system they have as to how they deal with it, how they handle it, how they move forward or up the scale with it, if that makes sense.
What I don't understand in that last line was Maimonides suggesting that a person who is injured or preoccupied with the things of the world will not get what is merit, because the line before says that if he can't busy himself with either wisdom or good deeds, which he can't get merit, which we are judged. Are we saying a person who's injured and unable to really take care of himself has no portion in the world to come, or a lesser portion?
Which, can you read us the line you're referring to?
In the last page, 290.
Oh, we didn't get to 290 yet. Yeah, let's keep reading. So yeah, we just read the first paragraph. So now we're in his Laws of Teshuvah, chapter 9, so on page 289. It sounds like you have it there, David. Do you want to read for us?
In his Laws of Teshuvah, chapter 9, Maimonides elaborated on the same theme, explaining that blessing and material rewards in this world are given to man with an opportunity of perfecting his character and meriting thereby immortality for his soul in the next world. And then the translation would be, all the blessings and the curses enumerated in the Torah may then be explained in this manner. If you have served the Lord with joyfulness, he will send you blessings. Sounds like Calvin to me. And withhold the curses, giving you the opportunity to become versed in the Torah and preoccupied in performance in order to merit the hereafter. But this you will enjoy two worlds, the good life in which one which leads you to gaining the next world, for a man does not acquire wisdom here and has no good deeds to his credit. With what can he gain merit? For it's stated, there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave. Ecclesiastes 9:10. If you forsake the Lord, indulge in gluttony, immorality, and like, he will bring you all these curses and remove all the blessings until your body be fit enough to perform divine precepts.
I think this is the line.
And this is where I start getting questioning. In this manner, you will forfeit the hereafter after losing two worlds. But when a man preoccupied with the manner of this world, dogged by illness, hunger, and war, he cannot busy himself with wisdom or good deeds through which we merit eternal life.
Right. So
that opens that a wide gate saying, if you don't do all this, you don't merit. But if you're working hard, you're injured, you're born, you're whatever circumstances you cannot do because you're busy trying to survive, you don't get merit, and therefore you don't get a full measure of heaven. That sounds pretty crappy to me.
Yeah, right. Right.
I mean, it sounds like what we're hearing a lot from a lot of politicians today, that basically I mean, people responsible for their own misery, and it sounds like no merit. Not even on earth are they granted credit, let alone in heaven. I
Well,
think
Still
there's
sounds like
what is-
Calvinist theology to me.
what theology did you say?
Calvinist.
Calvin.
Calvin. It sounds very dominionist too.
What?
Okay.
Yeah, I think dominionist is confusing. Can you say some more about that, Terry?
Well, there's a I'm not sure, it's not a sect as far as I know. It is a philosophy, a religious philosophy that says that those with the most have earned their dominion over the earth and its people.
That sounds like a variation of Calvin thinking.
It could be. I don't know anything about Calvinism. I just know what I've heard about this dominionist group.
It's more along the lines of the idea of prosperity gospel.
Thank you. Thank you for not making me feel like an idiot.
Nope.
Because I know I've read a lot about it, and it's creepy.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of it
absolutely.
is like, you know, if you deserve more, you will get more. And so the
Right.
more you have, the more that reflects that the more righteous you are.
Right.
I'm bothered by something here. I'm bothered by this hereafter. You know, we're going to be good so that sometime later on in the hereafter. And I don't know, I think my belief has always been that the rewards are here. The reward is in doing the right thing here. I don't think anybody knows if there's a hereafter. This promise of a hereafter bothers me.
No one has reported back yet.
No.
The right thing because
Only one
the
report.
right thing to do.
You know,
Regardless
the point is, we shouldn't be doing things because we're going to be rewarded later on. We should be doing things because that's the right thing to do.
Agreed.
Yeah, I don't
not
know.
whether you personally receive a reward for doing the right thing. It's just the right thing to do, period.
Right. But that is not what Maimonides says, and that is not what the Torah says in this chapter, and that's why we're talking about it. So the Torah, im b'chukotai telechu, that's the parsha we're in. If you walk in my chukim, in my laws, then all of these blessings will come to you, and if you don't, then all of these curses will come to you. That is the theology of the Torah that we are up against. And the Torah doesn't particularly focus on an afterlife, but it's certainly by the time of the Maccabees and
Yeah, that's it.
by the time of Maimonides has entered mainstream Jewish thought. And you know, Maimonides articulated 13 principles of Jewish faith. There never was a Jewish creed. This is what you must believe in order to be a good Jew. And his 13 principles of faith were never adopted as a creed in a formal way, but he included in his 13 principles of faith what a Jew should believe, and one of them is that there is an afterlife in which we will be rewarded and punished. And it's a nice, sophisticated belief that we can say, well, the reward of righteousness is righteousness, but the assumption here is that that is not a strong enough motivation for most people. That what motivates people is some other kind of, and the concept of afterlife enters Jewish thinking, as I said, around the time of the Maccabees, because that is the time when, first of all, it was the influence of the Greek culture, and second of all, it was becoming very obvious that the glory time of David and Solomon and Israelite hegemony in the region was never coming back. And trying to understand how we can be God's chosen people, how God loves us and is in this intimate relationship with us, and how we do the right thing and yet we suffer so much in this world. The concept of an afterlife is there to answer Kushner's question, when bad things happen to good people. How can we understand that? That is the question that religion has to answer. Why do bad things happen to good people? And the answer that Judaism comes up with, and not alone in that, is, well, it must be that there is a reward in the next life, because clearly it doesn't seem to be working out in the way the Torah suggests that it will in this world, where righteousness is rewarded and evil is punished. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to reconcile three principles: that God is all good, all powerful, and all knowing. So if God is all good, then the good have to be rewarded. If God is all powerful, then God has to have the capability of rewarding the good and punishing the bad. If God is all knowing, if God knows what's going on, then all of those things together equal, it must be that the good are rewarded and the evil are punished. And if that is not happening, then maybe God is not all good. You know, there are religions that teach that Zoroastrian, for example, there was a good God and a bad God, a God of light and a God of darkness. So maybe God is not all powerful. I think that is, in some sense, the Kabbalistic answer. I think it's, in some sense, Kushner's answer, that God may have the capability, but God has voluntarily self-limited. Or God is not all-knowing. Maybe God is the God of the big picture, doesn't really get involved in the details of what's going on in our individual lives. So we're so good, and yet we're not rewarded. So that's the foundation. But you know, we're going to get back here to the Torah text in a minute, and the rest of the chapter. It's all about be good, and good things will happen. Be bad, and bad things will happen.
So being poor and not having time, you still have time to be good. And a lot of poor people are very, 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 very good people. Oh, yeah. So it's nice to have a cushion in your religious life that says, I'm a good person here. And even though I'm, living in squalor, I will get my reward in heaven. And that's one of the things that's always bothered me about so much of Christianity, is that I've never felt that this is what he's basically saying, which is kind of interesting. He's agreeing with those people who say you'll get your reward later on. We don't have to, even if you suffer insult in your daily life, your reward is coming. And it's the idea that that somewhere or another, I don't know. I don't like the connection between a reward and an afterlife for what you do on earth. I'm uncomfortable with that.
Me too.
Me too.
Yeah. Who was the other me too? Sarah? I want to know who I'm in bed with here.
Oh. I'm in bed with you, but I agree with you.
I think we might.
Many of us, Terry.
We might pose the question the other way, Terry. Does anyone disagree? Is there? I would be surprised if anyone that I'm looking at on this screen right now would in fact argue that we should do good for the sake of an eternal reward.
I think, and I'm not arguing, I think.
You can argue, Sharon.
Well, that's
what about the fact that as the Jewish people, we have matured over the thousands of years, and when the Torah was written, we were not as mature a people as we are now. in what we've learned. And that kind of makes the reason we talk about doing good for good's sake, maybe a evolutionary view that we are a mature people now than we were back then.
Yeah, I think that's a helpful way to look at it. And I think we also see a maturation of our understanding of God through history. And, Sharon was talking earlier about the child rearing model. And I think that this model of, do the right thing and you'll be rewarded, do the wrong thing and you'll be punished, very much relates to child rearing. My grandson Michael, if he goes pee on the potty, he gets an M&M. If he goes poop on the potty, he gets 2 M&Ms. It's really hard for him to understand how come his dad doesn't want an M&M when he.
I just hope that he doesn't squeeze out his guts trying to get a double header every time. Give himself a hernia.
When you're dealing with
Hershey Kisses, anything like that.
Sharon, what were you going to say before, Sharon?
What I'm trying to say before is, when I do something right, when I do a mitzvah, I just feel rewarded. I feel at that time, that's my reward. And it doesn't have to come from outside. It could come from within.
I'm suggesting that's more of a mature.
The idea of maturity, and the idea of your own conscience and operating.
Intrinsic versus extrinsic.
Yes.
We've grown up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's about time.
5,000 years, you would think. So it's
35.
So let's go back.
Ontology repeats phylogeny.
Okay. You want to say more about that, Felix? You just
the maturation and development of the individual person, in a way, is parallel or similar to the evolution of mankind over the millennium.
Perfect. All right. And so that brings us right back to the text. We're in chapter 26, verse 13. So thinking about the population that we're dealing with, this is a group of people who have been slaves for hundreds of years. For hundreds of years, they've had no freedom of choice, no control over their time. For sure, they were living in a world where if they did the right thing, their basic needs would be met. They would have food and shelter. And if they did the wrong thing, as we see in the Torah, they were beaten to the point of being killed. So you're dealing with a group of people who the only thing they know as a motivation is reward and punishment, from external reward and punishment. And I think that's why the next verse reminds us of just that point. Can somebody read us 26:13?
Where is it? Okay. I, the Lord, am your God, who brought you from the land of the Egyptians to be their slaves no more, who broke the bars of your yoke and made you walk erect. Should I go on?
Yeah, no. Stop right there, please.
Okay.
Wow. That's what I have to say. Wow. Could you read it again, please, that last line?
No, you mean I, the Lord, am your God?
Go ahead.
I, the Lord, am your God, who brought you out from the land of the Egyptians to be their slaves no more, who broke the bars of your yoke and made you walk erect.
That is so powerful. I can't believe it. So the beginning, he starts out with sounding like a Jewish mother. Remember what I did for you. I suffered through 18 hours of labor to bring you into this world. And this is what I get. But the last part is the one that got me, is the whole visual, physical posture of going from slavery to erect, standing erect, proud, tall, not humbled and bent under the yoke. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Broken and you getting up and standing up.
That is so powerful.
Yeah.
What's the Hebrew, Rabbi?
Ani Adonai Elohechem, I am Adonai your God, Asher Hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, who brought you forth from Egypt, Mihiyot lahem avadim, from your being slaves, avadim hayinu, right?
Right.
Shvor motot ulchem, broke the bonds of your yoke. Old yoke, just the same as you would yoke an animal. The olech etchem, and I
stood you up.
I walked you erect.
What's the word for upright?
Komamiyut.
Komamiyut. Where do I know that from?
From Ahatikva. I think it's Ahatikva.
It is.
Yeah.
Rabbi, it's an interesting distinction in the Stone translation, as it says, I led you erect. So it to me, it puts more responsibility on the people to continue, not that I made you get erect or that I did it for you. It's I led you into it.
You know the word lalechet, to go. It's the root of halacha. Halacha is path. Holech is to walk. So it's the first person causative of that verb. Oh, literally, I walked you, or I made you walk.
I have a question. Your sound is not very good here. Were you saying avadim or avedim?
Avadim.
Okay. Because
avadim, like avadim hayinu, she said.
But one is work and one is a slave.
Right.
That's what I was trying to hear what you were saying.
Avadim. Do you have a text there that has the Hebrew?
No, I came in late to this, so I'm just kind of trying to catch up where you're saying you're supposed to be. So.
So do you have somewhere in your house a Hebrew Bible in Hebrew?
It's a mixed translation. It's the Eretz Chaim.
Oh, the Eitz Chaim, that's what I have.
Oh, okay. And I'll use that one.
Like that. Yeah, the Eitz Chaim, that has the Hebrew. That's my go-to. Good.
Yeah, but what I was reading from was, it says a new translation of the Holy Scriptures according to the Masoretic text.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that might be a little different. Every Torah is a little bit different.
Have to be aware that they say wait, Leanne, you can help me out with the Italian. I've heard this in the Italian expression. It's something like traditore. The translator is a traitor. How would you say that in Italian? Do you know?
What page?
So in the Eitz Chaim, it's page 748.
Thank you.
Yeah, the translator is a traitor.
And Rabbi Burke always said, every translation is an interpretation.
That's well said. Okay, so thus concludes the blessings section.
So if you think you had problems with this.
So, ve'im lo tishma'uli, but if you don't listen to me, I'm in verse 14. V'lo ta'asu et kol mitzvotai, you don't do all of these mitzvot of mine. And we're going to move into verse 15, but I did want to share from Pliskin his what he says about that verse that we just read. If you reject my statute, so if you have Pliskin there, it's page 302. So,
Yeah, yeah.
Chafetz Chaim used to say that there are people who are afraid to read this section of the Tochacha. So they call this Tochacha, which is rebuke. And when this parsha is read out loud in the synagogue, the custom is that when we get to this verse, it's read in a whisper. So when the Torah is chanted, instead of when we read this part in the synagogue, it's whispered so that it can barely be heard because it's so profoundly awful. We don't want to hear it, which is interesting that it begins with being lo tishma'u if you don't hear it.
This is horrible. This is horrible stuff.
Like, yeah, I don't know that. I don't hear it. So the Chafetz Chaim says there are people who are afraid to read this section, the warning of retribution for failure to keep the Torah. Here he says, in some synagogues, the person who reads the Torah in public reads this in a very low voice. And some people even walk out of the synagogue when this section is read, but they are very mistaken. I have to say, many, many years ago, I had a bat mitzvah student who had this portion for her, reading for her. In fact, it was Jesse's part as well. But this was someone else. Mom, you remember Gail Ziv's daughter, Sharona. And they really didn't want their daughter to have her bat mitzvah with this portion. They did not want their 12-year-old daughter reading this passage in the synagogue. They thought it was very bad luck, like the evil eye. So here's the continuation from Pliskin. The Chafetz Chaim gave an analogy of someone who had to travel on a dangerous path. It was on a very high and extremely narrow mountain, and he could easily trip and harm himself. Besides, there were many wild animals stalking in the area, and the whole path had many pitfalls. One person who was very aware of the serious dangers involved in traveling on that path was very nervous about it. After thinking the matter over, he came up with an original solution to his fears. He would walk blindfolded.
Oh my.
Surrounded him from all sides, and he would then be able to remain calm. Anyone with a drop of sense can easily see how this quote-unquote solution just adds to the problem without solving anything at all. He is now in even greater danger than before since he will be unaware of his true situation. Similarly, said the Chafetz Chaim, we must become aware of the dangers of not behaving properly. By realizing the consequences of transgressions and the failure to do good, you will watch your behavior and will gain immensely. While the Chafetz Chaim used to stress that our main emphasis should be on the benefits of Torah observance and the joy and pleasure of following the Torah, it is still very important to realize the harmful consequences of failure to observe the Torah. While our main focus should be on the positive aspects of doing what is right, and awareness of the harm of doing evil will motivate us to keep from doing wrong. So
this passage is so relevant to today and wearing masks and all those things we're talking about. It's just perfect.
You know, going back to that idea of whispering the bad stuff, I remember as a kid, you know, if there was bad news, it was often whispered. You know, if somebody had a tough health situation, that information was whispered. You know, and I don't know, that seemed like a really. I grew up in a very German community, and that just seemed, you know, a very German thing to me, that you whisper those tough things.
Yeah.
And don't say them out loud.
when I was diagnosed with diabetes, my mother-in-law did not want me to let anyone know. She wouldn't go to a restaurant with me because I would ask questions about what was in food. Or she made something for a party my brother-in-law had once, and she made it sugar-free for me, but she said, don't tell anyone there's no sugar in it. I mean, it was this horrifying disease that the world was going to get, or if they knew about it. And this was only 30 years ago. So people would hide things because they felt it was awful that people would know it, like Lisa said.
Sure. I think that's certainly the case with cancer. In a generation ago, you didn't say the C word, maybe the C word. So my mom put something in the chat. Mom, why don't you share what your thought is? You have to unmute yourself. You have to unmute.
I happened to be reading Not So this morning because I have to write something. And there was a midrash that I really liked. It said whenever anyone came to when they came to Mount Sinai, everybody was perfected. There was no problem anymore. They were all, their souls, I'm looking for the piece where I can find it. The midrash explains, when they arrived at Mount Sinai, they were miraculously made whole so that their physical perfection reflected the integrity of their souls. Thus, the Torah describes all the Israelites as standing at the foot of Mount Sinai, implying that none was crippled hearing the words of God, implying that none was deaf, seeing the thunder and light, suggesting that none was blind. As they distanced from Sinai and began to grumble about their hardships of the journey, the effect of the miracle began to wear off. So when they were at Sinai, they were pure.
Yeah, so I've never liked that midrash. I'm going to tell you the whole context of the midrash. So the midrash is, they were leaving Egypt and they all had broken bodies from, the physical labor that they had been involved in and from the abuse of their taskmasters. So broken arms, broken legs, things that were set, without the benefit of modern medicine. So, you've got this ragtag band of broken people. And the midrash, it's kind of horrifying to me. The midrash says that when God was about to give the Torah at Sinai, that that God said to the angels, it's not appropriate that these broken down people should be the ones to receive my Torah. So God had a very negative judgment of the physical being of the people, and the angels heard that hint, and the angels were the ones who healed the Israelites so that they would be physically perfect before receiving God's holy Torah. So I think it's a very negative image of God being so judgmental and possessive of the Torah and not wanting anyone who's less than perfect to receive the Torah. And we've actually talked about this when we talked about priests and the requirement for priests to be physically perfect in certain ways in order to publicly officiate. And
God was a bit vain, you might say.
What's that?
He had some vanity there. Is that what, or what would you call it? Not vanity, but
certainly superficiality, and it goes back to the conversation that we
a sense of arrogance. Of course, he's got, but yeah.
The connection between the physical and the spiritual.
Yeah, I would call it a geographic cure.
I don't know. I guess I don't see that as particularly negative. It seems to me that the idea there is that people aren't in a state of suffering and that people are in a state of someplace else outside their physical body, and this is the state in which Torah is received in a state of joy and free from pain.
All right, that's a beautiful way of expressing it, Lisa, and I really like that. And I just, wonder then, so, what does that say to the person who is suffering and is in pain? Are they not also eligible to receive Torah? I'm going to leave you with that thought because
The dog agrees.
so as a reminder, Wednesday Wise Aging, Thursday Social Lives While Distancing, Thursday night is Shavuot, and Friday morning we will have a Yisker service. So going into Shabbat. So live going on this week. I hope you can participate in much of it. Thank you for coming this morning.
Rabbi?
Thank you.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. But what night is the Shavuot night?
Thursday night.
It is Thursday night. Okay.
Shalom Bimrama, Puya
I'll let him be. I'll call you.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.